2, 1. Welcome back to Cuyahoga Sound Podcast. I'm Evan Stone.
I'm Chuck Schilling.
I'm George Chase.
Yes.
George Chase, our guest today, from the Sublets.
Yes, sir.
You're the first act that we've had like on immediately after just a taste. The music video you guys have out is just killer.
Thank you.
We made sure to share that today, and
I appreciate it, by the way. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Like Evan and I were both talking about it earlier today. Just like, all right, how the hell did they do that? That's pretty cool. It's probably something with Adobe After Effects, but I don't know how to do that far.
Yeah, it was people smarter than me put that together. We actually shot all the live footage in November of 2019, and we had this grandiose plan that we were going to do a little bit of animation and stuff, but it wasn't going to be too much. And we were talking with some people and whatever, and then the world started shutting down after the new year. And we'd always expected that we were going to get a couple songs done, get some stuff. Sorry.
It's all good.
Get some stuff going. I'm wearing this even. It's just going to confuse the heck out of me. We always knew we wanted to get a couple songs kind of in the queue and get a couple videos done and stuff. And sure enough, March of 2020, the world started shutting down. And we're like, now what do we do? So we just kind of kept working on that video because we're like, well, we hired this animator out in Poland. Her name's Marta. And we found her on Upwork, and she, put together this 5-minute insane video. So we've got an animated video that is completely just 5 minutes of animation to the Fallout, and it is crazy. So we went through and we picked kind of what some of our favorite scenes were and some of our favorite footage, and we're like, man, how do we pare this down now to and fit it in with this other stuff? But immediately once the world shut down, it was like, well, we just kind of got to move to animation now. And so we kind of merged some of it together, and I got a couple friends who are in video stuff who kind of helped me, understand kind of what the capabilities were, because we were like, well, what if there were these animated characters that interacted with us while we're playing guitar and doing this live, the live takes, and he's like, no. That would take forever. We'd have to go frame by frame or do this or that. He's like, no, we can't do that. And I was like, okay. So, and we'll just, we had some stuff where it was doors closing, we're playing and then doors closing on us and stuff. And there was some cool interplay with some of the animation. But for the most part, we just kind of put it together. We had plenty of time at that point. We're like, well, we couldn't even get together as a band and film more videos for some of the other stuff. So we're like, well, let's just sit tight. And, I think everybody kind of had the attitude where it was like, it's going to be a 2-month shutdown and we'll be back open by June. And it just kept going. And you're like, well, what are we going to do now? And so it's actually funny because there's a couple people who are like, wow, you guys sound so great. It's amazing how much you guys sound better than you were 2 or 3 years ago on this album. I'm like, we recorded that 2 or 3 years ago. But, I don't have the heart to tell them to their face, be like, yeah, thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. Cheers.
Thanks for the compliment. I'm going to shut you down now. Yeah, it was, so I watched it. I got back into town on Saturday. Yeah. No, Friday night. Saturday morning I woke up and, finally got through all my emails and everything and messages and opened it up and I watched it, had my headphones on, cranked up. I'm as soon as I got done, my wife was watching something on TV and I went and I shut it off. I put it on. I'm like, you got to check this out. This is really cool.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We worked hard on that one, and then the next couple of videos that we've got in the queue are not quite as frantic, but pretty, they all have kind of their own vibes of what they're doing, and they're meant to be still as engaging. But yeah, we're excited to get the next couple singles out and stuff over the next couple months. So
Cool.
It'll be fun.
Cool. How many weeks apart are you thinking about?
4 to 6, and it all kind of depends on how well this cycle does. So when I've gotten into music originally, MySpace was just barely a thing, and social media was just in its infancy. So you were still we would drive to shows. If Green Day was playing a concert, we'd literally drive and follow Green Day around with boxes of just burnt CDs and hand out free CDs after the show. And that was kind of how we kind of developed followings in Buffalo and, Pittsburgh and different places. And, again, social media wasn't really a thing, so there was never this feeling that like, wow, we have worldwide distribution at our fingertips. And so when we started doing it this generation of music, I knew I wanted to kind of be a little more purposeful in how I released music and what it was that I was doing. And so, and it's the stupid stuff because you're kind of a slave to the algorithms. And it's like, there isn't, like, my dream is still to put out a full-length album, but nobody wants an LP. Like, none of the streaming sites want an LP. So it's kind of, okay, well, we got to put out singles. Is it, is 2 weeks too soon? Probably. Is 8 weeks too long? Probably. So 4 to 6, and then, well, what if it catches fire? Then maybe we push that a little bit, and if we put it out and it just drops dead, and nobody cares about it, then okay, well, let's get another one lined up so we can release that in 4 weeks. And I mean, it's just such a silly game of trying to figure out, like, you release a single, then you release a video, then you release the lyric video first, then this video, and then this, and now here's an acoustic version, and here's fans covering the song, and like. And I get it, like, it's content, but at some point it also kind of has to come back to the music. And so some of these songs are brand new. Some of these songs I wrote when I was 18. The next single is actually a song I wrote when I was 18, or 19, somewhere in there. But but it's like, and granted, it's changed since then. Like, when I wrote that stuff as an 18, 19, 20-year-old kid, some of the stuff, even the songs I wrote when I was like 15, 16, they might have had great hooks or good element to it or something. And some of them I just scrapped. I'm like, no, it was terrible. But some of it I was like, okay, well, this part's good enough. How do I edit this out or breathe life into this now and make it a little more, modern, I guess, for lack of a better term, but just a little more, relevant to like what's going on today in music. And it's funny because all this stuff was supposed to be released 2.5 years ago. And I think one of the best things that happened was that we hit this pandemic. We had to put the brakes on, and then Machine Gun Kelly puts out a pop punk album and goes to #1 on the charts, and we're like, holy crap, we're relevant again. Like, and TikTok has a whole bunch of stuff on pop punk and all this other stuff, and it was like, wow, we can actually, there is a market still for this. I went and saw, there's a band called The Interrupters, and they're out of the, Bay Area, kind of the same scene that like Rancid and other bands are out of. But I think they've been around for like 5 or 6 years now. And I went and saw them at the House of Blues, and they didn't sell out the House of Blues. And this was only like 2 years ago or so. And 2.5 years ago, it was like December of 2019. And I remember watching this and feeling like they're amazing. And if they can't sell out House of Blues, I'm screwed. Like, I've got no chance of selling out House of Blues or ever really making it in this pop punk stuff. But it's where my heart is. So I'm going to do it. I just need to kind of curb my expectations of, every kid puts on a guitar and wants to be the biggest band in the world. I mean, not every kid, but I want to be. I was like, oh man, I want to play these huge shows and whatever. But then you see that and it's like, okay, so I'm not going to play, to 100,000 people, but I'm still going to do it and I'm still going to love it. And how do I make myself, how do I give myself the best chance to succeed? And that was when I really kind of went back to the drawing board and said, okay, what's the best business plan to actually make this thing work? And for a long time, there was about an 8-year hiatus from me being in bands and playing music and being in the music scene a little bit and knowing, some people.
When was that?
So I was 18, 19, very long story short, I'll give you the kind of high level of what happened. I graduated high school. I wanted to stay local for college because I felt like my band had an actual shot, and every kid thinks he's got an actual shot. And then we stayed local. We played some shows, didn't really know how to market ourselves or promote ourselves or what we were doing. Band kind of fell apart through college, and then I had some tragedy strike. I lost my brother to a drunk driving accident, and then I lost my mom 8 months later to cancer. And I was a 23-year-old kid. My brother died when I was 22. My mom died when I was 23. and I was just kind of lost. I knew I wanted to stay local. I knew I wanted to still have my hand in some sort of music. I didn't know how to make my band work, so I figured the next best thing was to own a bar in the Cleveland area and have bands come in and try to be on the circuit, you know. So I bought a small little bar in Garfield Heights. 23-year-old kid. I didn't drink. I didn't drink till I was 30. So I, buy this bar. Super ignorant. I had no idea what I was doing. And a month after I bought my bars, my mom passed away. So like the whole thing was just kind of this life taking me on this huge detour. But I all of a sudden didn't want to be on stage anymore. I didn't want to have to put this fake face on and be on stage and pretend that I was having fun. I hated life at the time. So I'm struggling. The bar became this like weird cathartic thing. You're talking to other people who are drowning their sorrows, and I'm not drinking, but I'm on the other side of the bar talking with them, and I kind of got lost in that bar world where I was waking up at like 11 a.m. I would come down, I'd turn on the fryers and the hood and get all the stuff going and make myself breakfast on the in the kitchen. Open up the bar, start serving patrons, whatever. By about 6 p.m. I was usually off. Would roughly come off, and my bartenders would come on. And I lived above the bar. There was an apartment above the bar, so then I'd go upstairs, shower up, get changed, whatever, and then come back downstairs usually around 8 o'clock, and then basically shake hands and get to know the patrons and buy people drinks and talk and whatever. And then shut down the bar usually around 1 or 2, depending on the night. And then the bartenders and barbacks and whatever, we'd all go upstairs. And I say like there were not a lot of people. There would be like 2 or 3 people working per night. But then we'd go upstairs and play video games and hang out. And I'd usually pass out around 4 a.m. or something, and wake up the next day at 11 and do it all over again. And for a 23-year-old kid, that sounds like a dream. Like, oh, that sounds so great. But I kind of got to a point where I was like, man, I'm killing myself. I'm eating all this crappy food, and I'm, living a life that just isn't fulfilling. And I'm, not doing music, not doing the whole reason I got into the bar industry was music, and I'm not doing it.
How long before you realized that music was such a missing part of your life?
So 8 years was really when I had stopped performing when I was about 22, 23. I had the bar. I had a really dicey incident where a guy pulled a gun on me, and I realized at that moment that I didn't want to be in the bar industry in this capacity anymore. I had too much of a bleeding heart, and I wanted to save people. There were guys who would come into the bar and just drink tons every night. And I had the talk with this one guy. His name was Bob, and I was like, Bobby, what are you doing, man? Like, you're a nice guy, you're intelligent, but every night you're in here and you're just drowning your sorrows, and what's going on? And it turns out that he had lost his parents and his sister a few years back, and he was like, look, I just want to drink myself to death. And he's like, you are literally like half a block away from my house. So I walk here, I drink, and I walk back home. If you don't serve me, I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to drive down to the next bar and probably kill somebody on the drive back. So you tell me what you want me to do. You want me to go to another bar? I'll go there, but I'll probably kill somebody on the drive back. And what do you say? You look at this guy and you're like, then I'm going to try to make this as happy of a place that I can make it. And so we would talk, and and I was hoping that maybe he would find some spark and something to live for. And sure enough, he drank himself to death, and didn't come in for a couple days. And we called the police, and it turns out they went to his house, and he was dead on his floor. And I wish that was the only person that I could say died, from alcohol-related stuff. But it wasn't like, they were just, you would see these guys drinking themselves into oblivion. And like I said, I knew between that stuff and then having the gun pulled on me, I just knew that I didn't want to be part of that anymore. So I bowed out of the bar industry. I still, was somewhat affiliated with it. Long story, I was still somewhat affiliated with it, but I started doing restaurants and opened it was like a salad soup smoothie restaurant called Chop It. And we were in major malls in the area. We had 6 locations in all the Belden Village and Eaton and Strongsville, South Park, and all the major malls in the area, Great Lakes. And but I knew I didn't want any alcohol, any hoods or fryers or anything. I was trying to keep a very streamlined, simple concept. And we opened that in 2010, and malls were still doing pretty well in 2010. But mall traffic started to decline, and all the way that our rent was structured with all these deals, our rent would increase every year. So rent was increasing, mall traffic was decreasing. We started getting pinched, had to close everything up in 2015. But one of the things along the way was in 2014, at the tail end of 2014, the tail end of summer of 2014, we were catering some concert events. And I'll kind of condense this, but basically an opening act didn't show up. And I was like, they were like, oh man, what are we going to do? We need somebody to play like 45 minutes worth of music. And in my mind, I'm like, I could do that. Sure, give me a guitar. I'll play 45 minutes of acoustic covers and stuff. It's not, it's fine. And they're like, oh, great. Okay, you'll be on in, blah, 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 a little bit of time. It'll be fine. And as they walk away, I'm like, what did I just do? I have not, and I started thinking about it. I'm like, I haven't performed in 8 years. I have not been on stage in 8 years. What did I just get myself into? And
you were playing plenty on your own, though?
No, nothing.
No.
I was doing bars and restaurants. I had dropped out of music. I don't know that I picked up a guitar for probably...
You still own a guitar?
2 years. I still owned some guitars, and I kidded myself. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm a musician. I play, but I was like, what did I just do? And it's funny because I go back and I watch footage of that, and I'm like, man, I was flying through songs. Like, it was fast. It was a little sloppy. My fingers hurt. I didn't have calluses. All the stupid stuff that you kind of forget. Like, 45 minutes today, 45 minutes, like, oh yeah, I could do that. But at that time, I was like, my voice was gone by like 4 songs in. I didn't properly warm up. I didn't do any of that stuff. I had a couple other friends who were there who were able to be on stage with me and sing some stuff. So we kind of, split up some of the heavy lifting, but it had the potential of being a train wreck, but it was probably one of the biggest turning points in my life where I really realized how much I missed it. And so I started to play more acoustic stuff and play like bars and restaurants, and I was trying to do like a duet thing with, a couple different people, and but in 2015 I really realized that I'm killing myself trying to make the restaurants work. I was married for 7 years at that point, and I'm failing as a husband. I'm failing as a business owner. And it's all because I'm just not doing what I was put on this planet to do. And that was it. May of 2015, we shut everything down, and shut down the restaurants. It was very important to me to bow out gracefully. Like, I didn't want to file bankruptcy and stick anybody. Our vendors were great. Our landlords were great. So I wanted to try to, make peace with everybody, and we did. Everybody, it was a pretty amicable split, and I started doing music full time. And, at first it was just playing those acoustic gigs, getting the reps in, playing any show I could get, whether it was to 3 people at a bar, whether it was house parties, didn't matter. I was like, I need to get back out. I need to get the reps. I need to remember what it's like when you break a string on stage. I need to remember what it's like to get a heckler, or to, lug your gear in a rainstorm, like stupid stuff. Get somewhere, set up, and then they tell you, hey, you're not playing for another hour. Well, now what? I need to remember what those things feel like. And, need to remember what it's like to play a show and have nobody care that you're playing a show, and be like, okay, well, I'm just going to play what I want to play, And so there's a lot of things come from experience and from just being out there. And as I was doing those shows, I knew that I wanted to come back to pop punk, to the stuff that I knew, to that pop rock, like high energy, fun music. and I knew that I wanted to come at it in a way that was like authentic, but thought out, and purposeful. And that was kind of 2018. I started really kind of looking. 2017, I started really looking for bandmates. Went through a couple people, met them, and met a lot of great people through it. But just a lot of people who, we had different ideas. They want to do their own thing, and I don't know if it's hard to like make friends or meet new people when you're, not a 20-year-old kid. Like, 20, you're thrown in college, whatever. You can meet all these people, you do all this stuff, but all of a sudden you get a little later in life, and you're like, can I call you? Are we okay? Like, we're friends now. Do you want to grab a drink? Are we? But then the opposite too, of like people being like, oh, we're best friends. I'm like, I don't really like you. Thanks, but no. And then, like I said, man, the whole landscape had changed. Trying to learn social media, trying to learn TikTok and things that, I'd never really paid much attention to. And just trying to figure out the best way to market and promote our music, and realizing that, in so many ways the music becomes secondary in today's culture, in today's world. It becomes, and I guess that's always kind of been a thing, like, you've always kind of had these acts where, yeah, they can sing and they can play guitar, they can do this or that or whatever, but man, they're sexy, and I knew we weren't going to sell ourselves on our sex appeal. So it was like, well, we've got to be good, but we've also got to be, there's got to be something else about us. There's got to be something special and funny and well thought out and whatever. It was just kind of interesting to kind of go at it. And people, recently somebody asked me how I define success. They're like, how are you going to know if you made it? How are you going to know if it's success? I'm like, man, I used to think about that when I was a kid. I used to be like, I know I'm going to be successful when I reach these benchmarks and whatever. And today it's like, I'm going to put one foot in front of the other. And at the end of my time here on this planet, when I look back, if I left this planet happier than how I found it, it was a success. And that's it. And that is the only benchmark. I want to be a good dad. I want to be a good husband. And I want to know that I left this planet happier than when I found it. And that's it. And music, performing, those are the ways that I'm trying to help make this planet a little brighter.
Good words for anybody, no matter what your industry. These different mediums like TikTok, do you find they influence your songwriting or the way you think about hooks? If you're like, hey, this is just too long to maybe catch on to this medium?
So it's definitely influenced. I first of all, I've always been a pop writer. It's pop written with like distorted guitar, but it's pop. And I wrote a lot of acoustic stuff. Like I loved a lot of like Garth Brooks and stuff growing up. So, I will write stuff that's a little more country based or a little more. And I went through phases. I think it's like every kind of kid does. Green Day was the reason I picked up a guitar in the first place. But then,
Same here. I wanted to be Billy Joe Armstrong when I was 14.
Oh, dude, I still do. There are so many things I loved about Green Day. And actually, one of my good friends made a comment. He's like, I'm so jealous that Green Day is your favorite band. I'm like, why? He's like, because they're still out there touring and putting on amazing shows. They're like, they haven't broken up. There hasn't been any huge major scandals. They're still putting out, for the most part, decent quality music. Even if you don't love everything they're doing, like, they're still out there doing it. And they're working hard. And I'm like, I never thought of it that way. Like, I just kind of always took them for granted. But I digress. So Green Day was the reason. Dookie was the reason I picked up a guitar. Prior to that, I had played piano and organ and some other stuff because of like Phantom of the Opera and some other stuff I loved. I had a lot of cool influences in my life kind of up to the time that I heard Basket Case for the first time. But once Basket Case hit, it was like nothing else mattered. But then, I went through different phases where I liked, Metallica and ICP and Celine Dion, and like I just had this wide gamut of music.
Yeah, that was about 3 different artists I can think of. Yeah. You just hit 3 different corners of the triangle. Right?
So it was so funny because there were so many things I loved.
That was awesome.
But classic rock was not one of them. Like I kid you not, I was 18 when I realized that Sweet Child of Mine was not Led Zeppelin, which sounds ridiculous to say today. I fully understand that. But at the time, I never knew, like, hair metal, classic rock, whatever, like, that was just not something I was into. But if you talked about, like, Patsy Cline or Buddy Holly or Big Bopper, like, I knew them, and I knew a lot of country, and I knew George Michael, and I knew Richard Marx, and I knew, I knew all these different things, but classic rock was never something I was into.
Is that the kind of stuff your parents listened to? You grow up listening to?
My parents
that
were into,
type?
like, Patsy Cline and Beach Boys and Buddy Holly and stuff like that. And then some weird, like, I shouldn't say weird, but just, like, some older, like, country stuff, Willie Nelson, but, like, even stuff like I forget some of the names. Kingston Trio was one of my earliest influences. I love Kingston Trio. If you haven't heard some of their stuff, like, go back and listen to it, and it's awesome. And then you imagine that as, like, a punk show, like, with distorted guitars or some of the harmonies they're doing and some of the songs they're writing. Like, that's, like, I look at Vodka. I look at Buddy Holly as well, and I'm like, man, you give Buddy Holly a distorted guitar and imagine what he would have done. You give so many of these different artists, the mediums and the means that we have today, and imagine how their music would have been different. I thought S&M, the Metallica Symphony album, I thought that was brilliant because if you imagine Bach or Beethoven or Mozart with electric guitar, and what would they have done, and how would this have been so different? And I always thought it was funny that people, like, kind of poo-pooed, modern music or these, metal music or whatever. But I'm like, that's so much of what these guys were doing, several hundreds of years ago. And then you come up here and, I mean, the musicianship is still amazing. It's just different, but you gotta, anyways. I'll get off my soapbox for that. But bottom line is my parents listened to that, and I was an accident. I was 17 years younger than my oldest brother. I was 13 years younger than my second oldest brother, and I was 11 years younger than my sister. So my oldest brother was into bands like ELO, the Beatles, kind of this, like, I don't know, I mean, it was all pop music, but it was slightly less distorted guitar, more kind of rock, more, interesting sounds. And then, like, my second oldest brother, he was the one who really was into, like, Guns N' Roses and some of the metal stuff, Motley Crue. But him and I never got along because he was kind of the one who was always, like, the straight shooter. So if I, like, did something and I'd be looking for, like, affirmation as a kid, I'm the little brother. I want him to like what I'm doing. He's like, yeah, you're a jerk. Thanks. It was never quite those words, but, like, that's what the little brother heard, Yeah. And then my sister was really into Richard Marx and Cyndi Lauper and some of those, like, quote-unquote cheesy, 80s songs. But, man, like, you go back and listen to some of those, there's some great musicianship on those. And actually I saw Richard Marx a couple years ago at Northfield. And he's playing and singing and playing piano and doing all this stuff. I'm like, dude's a showman. Dude's good. Like, there's a lot of great stuff there. So I kind of, grew up listening to some of those things. And my sister got me into Garth Brooks when I was a kid. And so I listened to all those kind of things. And I was never allowed to watch MTV as a kid. My parents were gone, and I'm, at home alone. I was like 10 years old. It was one of the first times they left me home. So what do? I put on MTV. And sure enough, Basket Case came on. And it was the first time I ever heard it. And it was the first time I ever heard a band and was like, that's mine. Not influences from my siblings, not influences from my parents. That's mine. And I lost it. That was it. I cranked it. I loved it. My birthday is beginning of February. Dookie came out February 1st. My cousin bought me the CD. It was the first CD I ever owned. I often say that Mike Dirnt taught me bass. And I watched Phantom of the Opera, so I had loved musicals, taught myself how to play some basic, like, melodies and stuff from Phantom on the organ and on piano. Had some piano and keyboard lessons and stuff just to kind of feel out what I was hearing and figure out how to hear, the right and the left hand and all the other stuff. But it really wasn't until Dookie that I became like, this is it. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And
So when did you get your first guitar?
That's a really good question. I stole my brother's. So both my brothers played guitar.
Oh, yeah.
And I would steal theirs often.
Evan's stomach's over here telling its own story.
Hey man, it's a better story than mine. But no, I would steal theirs and I'd play theirs, and it was like, you know, my brother had a Gibson SG, which, you know, as a kid you don't know what guitars are. You're just like, I just pick it up. It's got 6 strings and I play it. Early shows that I played, like, I didn't have anything on stage with me other than a really crappy amp and a really crappy guitar. No tuners, no pedals, no nothing. Just like, you plug in, you play, and that was, to me, that was like what these punk shows were, you know. And so I would say the first guitar I ever played was a Gibson SG. And then I got this seafoam green, you know, trying to be like Billy Joe Armstrong, trying to have this like, and you know, I didn't realize it was, his guitar was like Sonic Blue or whatever the color was, but like, I thought seafoam green was his guitar, so I special ordered this thing and got it, and it was like some off-brand Strat copy thing, but I loved it, and I did everything that he did. I sanded off the headstock, put stickers all over it. I've still got tons of pictures from that era of like
I was
playing
planning
these.
to ask how many stickers you had on.
Tons, man, tons. And I had no idea what a humbucker pickup was, so I'm playing like a single coil pickup, so like it's sounding kind of gnarly and, you know, all this other stuff. But that was it, and I just knew, like, as a kid I wanted to do this. Had no real plan of how we were going to do it, and the first couple bands, I had actually no intention of ever singing. So because my brothers were into music, they had a whole bunch of gear that they would like hand me down, and you know, I had 4 tracks and I had crappy stuff, whatever. Well, my one brother really upgraded his studio. He moved out to Arizona and then eventually Nevada, and he sent me back this 8-track cassette, little 8-track thing. But I'm like, I have 8 tracks. This is amazing. Like, none of my friends had 8 tracks, and I would have people over and record bands in my basement. And it's funny because the bands that I recorded in my basement are like people who are still doing it today. And I look at some of the stuff that they did in my basement, and I'm like,
Was that on cassette tape?
yeah, everything. And so like Nick Tolar, who's in Herzog, Robert Kovac, who's Robert Kovac,
Piano
is just,
player.
yeah,
Yeah.
flipping amazing. They would come over and they would do this stuff, and I'd record in my basement. And everything, the rule was basically, I will record you for free, and I'll give you the stuff, and you guys can have it. But A, I'm still learning, and B, if you guys ever get a show and you guys need somebody to open, you just remember me. But I mean, there were a whole bunch of other bands that I, you know, recorded in my basement, and people who were just, eventually a person who became my drummer, his name was John Polumsky. He was in a band called No Outlet, and they were like the first punk band I ever recorded. And it was this female-fronted lead singer. Her name was Cassie. She just had a great voice, and it's funny because she might have actually had a terrible voice, but as my like 16-year-old brain remembers it, she was this amazing, you know, lead vocalist, and they played these different shows and stuff, and I got to record them in my basement, and like I'm thinking I'm around like royalty, like this is the coolest thing ever. I'm, you know, listening to these guys, and then John and I eventually just kind of started jamming, and he became the drummer. I had a drummer named Kelly who, like, she was awesome, and one of the biggest regrets I have in my musical career is the way that I split with her, because I was just too much of a coward to be like, Kelly, I found somebody else I want in my band. And part of it also was like she was going to college, I was going to college, like we were different places. John, you know, was able to fill in, and I just, instead of telling her to her face, I just kind of put him in the band and pushed her out. And it was really rude. And sorry, Kelly, you deserved better. And her and I are still like Facebook friends now and stuff, and we still like comment once in a while, but like a lot of things that you kind of, you know, learn growing up, like how the way you should have handled something. But John became our drummer, and you know, we played a bunch of shows and stuff, and you know, did some mini tours and whatever. But yeah, it all started because I was recording bands in my basement, and I had no intention of ever like being the lead singer. I didn't think my voice was good enough. I still don't think my voice is good enough, but I was like, nobody else is gonna sing my songs. So I was doing demo tapes, and at the time I didn't have the ability to like copy, like mass produce cassettes. So a lot of times what I would do is I would just like do acoustic demos. It was faster to do acoustic demos, hit record, play like 5 songs, pull that cassette tape out, put in a new cassette, hit record, play 5 songs, pull it out. So like I was handing out demo tapes that were like different versions of the songs. And people gravitated towards it, and they kind of liked it, and they were like, "Oh, these are cool. When are you playing a show?"
That's
Playing a
dedication,
show?
man.
I don't know. Like, I did. I must have put out probably like 40 tapes.
Nice.
And
nice.
and I would literally like sit in my closet, and it would be like 2 a.m, and my parents are sleeping downstairs, and I'm like getting quieter and quieter with each take, so that like I wouldn't wake up my parents. And I'd give out these cassettes, and my voice was going and whatever. But I was like, how else do you get music out there, you know? And you give it to your friends, and you hope that they like it. And one of my buddies, his name's Adam, and I'll never forget, he found me one day at school, and he's like, dude, it's awesome. And he started singing me my song. And I was like, you, what? Like, and that was the moment that I really, I was like, I guess I'm doing this. I guess I'm going to be the singer, and I guess I'm going to write these songs and put them out, and, you know, we'll see how far we can take this. Until life, you know, kicked me in the teeth, and then, you know, you take an 8-year hiatus from music.
But you're back. You're back. You're strong. You learned some lessons, and you know, you said you wanted to bring it out the right way, and I mean, it caught me instantly. You know, I was messaging Evan right away. I'm like, dude, did you check this out yet? You know, because we had the message
thank
kind of
you.
sitting there.
Yeah, you mean that Franz Ferdinand type? that video looks like reminded me of "Take Me Out." You remember how that animation
Yep.
was in that one with the band right in there? That was cool.
So Green Day's Insomniac,
Yeah, the cover of that too.
Stuck With Me was, I think, Green Day's like 3rd single off of Insomniac. And Stuck With Me was shot black and white, was like their live footage. And then they had this animated, you know, stop motion stuff going on in between. And that was kind of it. Once we realized that we had to kind of switch gears and had to put more animation in, I was like, okay, and this is what I'm going to kind of pull from. But yeah, Franz Ferdinand's the same kind of thing, where it was just like, we need to, you know, interact with both of these. And we knew if it was going to be our first offering, like, I wanted to have a healthy dose of the live band, but we had to have something that was eye-catching and that, you know, conversation starting. So
In the back of my mind, I must have been thinking of Insomniac too, because I thought that like the style of that song reminded me of like Insomniac Nimrod era
Yeah.
of Green Day. And it was really cool. Haven't heard anything like that recently from like a new band.
Well, wait till you
Yeah.
hear some of the other stuff.
All right,
'Cause
looking forward to it.
Goes down that rabbit hole of, like I said, some of the stuff so the next 2 singles we're releasing actually are songs that I'd written like, 20 years ago. And so it was stuff that was very much influenced by a lot of that early Green Day kind of stuff. And you'll hear it. I mean, you put on, I think the next single, we're going between 2 singles right now, which order we're going to release them in. I think the next single is going to be a song called Finally Free, which, I mean, it's a straight up, like, it's a pop punk song. No 2 ways about it. And then Misunderstood will probably be the 3rd single. And that one's a little poppier. I mean, it's still got distorted guitars, and it's still, but it was kind of this like 3-chord punk song that evolved into just something slightly sophisticated isn't the right word, but just something slightly more than just a
more
3-chord. Yeah, you know, there are a little more like synths, and there's like a bass drop in it and stuff that didn't. You know, we weren't trying to like switch gears, but we were trying to make it interesting. You know, what I always thought was interesting, like I loved when I was a kid, I got my first really good set of headphones, and I'd listen to these albums, and I was like, I didn't know this stuff was going on. I didn't know there was this, you know, you listen to like, even like an album like Dookie, seems like it's really straightforward until you put on really good headphones or have a good set of speakers in front of you, and all of a sudden you hear the different dynamics and things that are going on in the different parts, and you're like, whoa, this is intense. And because a lot of the music that I grew up listening to was this poppy, Celine Dion and Backstreet Boys and even like ICP and stuff. Like, there's stuff happening in the backgrounds of stuff that you're like, I didn't know that was going on. And so I kind of wanted to have some of those textures in some of the stuff that we're doing. And, some of it's very purposeful and some of it's accidental, but it was like, well, that was cool. Leave that in.
Keep that in.
Yeah. Keep those artifacts in, that because we're not perfect. We tracked everything as a band. We're all in the same room playing it together. We tried not to like multi-layer everything or multi-track everything. And so some drum takes you're going to hear, might have like a weird, stick click. I mean, you wouldn't hear it necessarily if I don't like point it out, but like I know it's there. Yeah. Or like I slid up to a chord and I'm like, well, it's, what? Part of the take now. It's what it is, and the rest of it sounds great.
It's fantastic hearing those little things, though. Like when you pick up on them, and then you can't unhear it. Sometimes it gets to be too much. If it's like, I don't know if you ever heard. I know you're not a big classic rock guy, but Since I've Been Loving You by Led Zeppelin, you can hear John Bonham's bass drum pedal for every note. Like, it is the first time it feels like you're in the room, but now I've been hearing it now for 30 years or whatever. I'm like,
so that's a great point. Like, but there is this feeling of attachment. Like, you're like, oh man, I'm there.
Yeah.
Like, they are human, and there becomes this like attachment to it. But you're right. If it becomes either too sloppy or too repetitive or too much whatever, like you're like, now it just it breaks that. I can't suspend my disbelief long enough to really be in that album anymore. But for the most part, I do love those kind of things. So, yeah.
So should we be listening with some headphones to pick up some hidden gems in there? Some Easter eggs?
I mean, there's definitely stuff to listen on the headphones, and you'll hear, like, there's just a lot of cool textures with like backing vocals and stuff that we kind of buried in the track, but that like give it a little bit more life or give it a little bit more just ambiance and texture. And some of the stuff that just gives it, cool energy where it's like, wow, that's awesome. But I don't want to record something that's perfect.
Yeah.
Because to me, we aren't perfect. You're never going to come see us live. We played last Saturday, and the energy was great, and we got a lot of great feedback, and there was a lot of great, moments in the show, but it was not perfect. There were a lot of sloppy moments, but that's part of going to see a live band, is you want to have this, like, it's almost like going to see a live sporting event where, like, there's an element that like, if you knew the guy was going to catch the ball every single time, or you knew that, I don't know, you knew the outcome, like, then what's the point of going to see it?
Yeah.
So when you go see a live show, like, there's got to be that element that, like, I don't know, maybe the guy's going to fall off stage.
It keeps it great for the band, too.
Like, oh, yeah.
That's like when somebody fucks up and somebody corrects it with something new or, reels it back in, like, and everybody comes together as musicians. That's some of the greatest parts of performing.
Saturday night, I jumped to a verse early, and, luckily my bandmates were right there. They heard it. They,
Jumped
picked
right
me
in
up.
with you.
Yeah. And for the most part, nobody noticed. I noticed as I'm singing it, and I'm like, I came in, a little too early. But it was fun, and those are kind of things where, like, when a band is almost too rehearsed, it almost becomes easy. And it's like, well, that's not fun. I want to see him trying something hard. I want to see it. There was this great thing. So another thing in my past life, I was a magician. And there's a lot of writings about magicians that, like, when you make something look too easy, people just think it's easy. They have no idea, especially in magic, where they have no idea the technical skill that goes into something. So if the audience has no idea how hard that move is and you just make it look flawless, it kind of cheapens how good that magician is or how good that move is. And sometimes I feel like that with musicians, where if somebody's doing a guitar solo or doing something that's like crazy hard and crazy technical, or doing voice runs or whatever, but they make it look so easy, or they aren't excited about it, or it becomes this like, well, nobody cares, like nobody cares if you, I don't know, played a chord because you make it look easy. Nobody cares that you just did this killer solo because you made it look easy. So if you make it look hard, or you screw up every once in a while, or if there's that human element to it, it all of a sudden is like, oh, like, this is cool. I got to experience that. And maybe you do get it right 9 times out of 10, but the people that are there on that 10th time remember that. And if you do it in a way that's, I don't know, just more human, people walk away from that and, take that with them.
Feel more connected too. I mean,
Yeah.
as a musician too. Like there's some. Went and saw Megadeth years ago, and I forget who they had. They go through guitar players, like every week. But I forget who they had playing guitar. But he just was going through these blazing solos. He just smiled and looked at the crowd while doing it. I was like, well, I'm just going to go home and sell all my gear because, But you see someone that's playing something excellent, and you can see the work going into it. You're like, I'm going to go home. I'm going to grab my guitar. I'm going to work on this.
Yeah, I mean, dude, there's so many great bands out there that, technically they might not be the best, but you feel something, or you are passionate because they're passionate. And it makes you want to be part of that. It makes you want to support them. When they make it look so easy. Like, there's a reason why so many people hate Tom Brady, because in a way he makes it look too easy, or made it look too easy. Yeah. And, I mean, the guy is amazing, and I think he deserves all the success that he's had. But, people want to root for the underdog. People want to root for people who, they're like, oh, man, maybe if I try hard enough, I might be able to do that. And like, I know I am not a great guitarist. I know I'm not a great vocalist. But when I'm up on stage, I'm going to give you the best that I can give you. Even if I'm incredibly drunk on stage, like, I'm still going to, we're going to do this together, and we're going to have fun, because without you guys in the crowd, I would just be playing for myself, and I don't want to do that.
And your bandmates. When you're saying that you come in early, they pick up on that and they're right there with you. That's one of the things that makes me feel best when I'm on stage, is when like we can just like go with the flow all together as a unit. When I'm in a band and I'm playing music that we've rehearsed, but like we're out there giving it all together, it makes you feel like bigger, like as a person, and like each person feels bigger because you're all doing it together and you're moving together.
You're greater than the sum of your parts, absolutely.
I love when that happens, when you fuck up, but then like nobody knows except you that you fucked up.
That's why. So I was doing those acoustic gigs, trying to cut my teeth again, get back in a little bit in the music world and whatever. And I'm like, man, I miss a band. Like, I know I could go out and do acoustic stuff, and that's fine. But man, do I miss a band. And I've heard other musicians talk about it. Like, they love doing the acoustic thing, they love doing the solo thing, and that's awesome. And there's elements that I love doing, just by myself, but that, being on stage, being a team, is just, it's the greatest feeling. And yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's try a little segue here, because we're talking about being drunk on stage. Would you like to tell us a little bit about this vodka you brought in?
Sure. So this is Voodoo Vodka. The distillery is in Medina. And Ken and Brad are the guys who own this place, and they started a couple years ago.
What's the name of the distillery?
BKO Distillery. And like I said, the bottle, or the it's called Voodoo, but it's spelled Voudous. So it's like the New Orleans, kind of French spelling.
Yeah. Oui.
And well done.
Evan's,
nice.
Evan's presenting.
I met the guys.
You can see him through the bottle.
I met the guys a while ago, and they are just really great guys. They are a blast to hang out with and talk with. And Brad was a guitarist / songwriter in a band called Nonpoint. And very long story short, had kids, decided he needed to like kind of settle down, and stayed here, and him and Ken started this. And I'm, again, giving you kind of the guys the abridged version, but the cool part is on February 19th, they're doing, it's their 2-year anniversary of being open. And they have grown so much that they needed to expand. And so they're doing this whole big, like, re-grand opening with this, new section of their distillery and tasting room and all this other stuff. And, but yeah, I've got no affiliation with them. I love the vodka and I love the guys. So it's been cool to kind of watch them grow and drink their vodka. I legitimately, I've had the privilege of trying some really great vodka, and this is in my top 2 favorite vodkas of all time. And it's cheap. It's like $25 a bottle. So it's not, I mean, I say cheap, but it's not, you're not paying $100 for a bottle of this. And I just, man, I really, really enjoy it. I like vodka.
All right, Voodoo Vodka from BKO Distillery, bkoinc.com. Check them out. We'll be drinking a lot of it in the upcoming episodes, I'm sure. Let's mention some of our other affiliates here.
Yeah, please.
We're sponsored by Basement Trader. Mr. Chuck Kaminsky.
Mr. Chuck Kaminsky. Since day one, he's been here helping us out. Evan's been jamming on a bass he bought from Chuck.
Oh, I can't get enough of it.
Yeah.
Actually, I already need to set it up. My room, my jam room, the heater, the vent is like clogged up or something, so it got kind of cold in there. I got a little bow that I need to take it back to him. Basement Trader, BASSMENT, Trader.com. Reverb store, repairs, setups. Find you vintage gear.
Awesome,
used
dude.
gear,
He just
new
sold
gear.
a bunch of vintage gear. I think he had a good weekend this past
He had a great
weekend.
weekend, yeah.
Congratulations, Chuck.
All right, Chuck. We see you. We're also in partnership with Listen CLE, listencle.com. They have links to 9 mood-based, not genre-based,
Which is the best.
playlists made up of exclusively Ohio, mostly Northeast Ohio bands.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
you can look up hashtag Listen CLE on the streaming sites, or you can go to their site, listencle.com, to find links to them.
All right. You sound really professional today.
I do.
Yeah.
Must be all the voodoo.
You got one more to go through here?
I do. We have a new business, a new Cleveland business that's doing great job. They are a meal prep delivery or pickup service, and they have 100% gluten and dairy-free food in Cleveland. They're called Unrefined. Unrefined, you can go to Unrefined Cleveland on Instagram, unrefinedls.com to place an order, and there's coupons with your first order. They use local vendors for their products, and the food is always served fresh and never frozen. They'll deliver it right to your door within 35 miles of downtown Cleveland.
That sounds
Unrefined,
fantastic.
yeah, and the food is amazing. Awesome. I've been having it since day one. They just rebranded. That's a new name. You might know them as Prep Sluts with a Z before.
That does make me laugh, but I can see why they
was.
did a rebrand.
Yeah.
Well, I think the rebrand's been in the works for a while, and they finally decided on it. Moving forward, they have a great new website logo, Unrefined. Nice. There it is.
You got me cracking up now.
Yeah, it had me cracking up the first time I heard of them.
I believe it.
That's your business name? Oh, all right.
All right,
We stuck
let's
with
go
it
for
for
it.
a while. They killed it with that now.
Maybe that's it. Maybe we should stop calling ourselves the Sublets and just be like the music sluts.
Yeah.
Music slut.
I like
Yeah.
it.
All right. The sub sluts.
Yeah, there you go.
That's probably a website already, though.
Maybe.
Yeah. Yes.
The
It's
Dom
from
Sluts
Subway.
and the...
Not one to check out at work.
It's nothing but footlongs.
Oh, $5 footlong. That was my favorite song.
Oh, I liked the.
Give me back that fillet fish.
Oh,
Give me that fish.
throwback jams
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah. Actually, not to get off topic, but if we're going to talk jingles, my top 2 favorite jingles of all time was the original, like, not original, but like the Coke jingle. It was that. The stars will always shine, the birds will always sing.
Oh,
Whenever there's a thirst, there's always the real thing. Coca-Cola Classic is always the one. Anyways, and then there
I've
was,
never heard that one.
oh, it's so
I
good.
recognize
I
it.
think that was our first vocal performance on the
So good.
podcast.
And then there was a Mountain Dew commercial that MXPX did.
Oh, yeah. Where do you want to go? What
Yeah.
do you want to do?
Yes.
No, we
You
gotta
wanna
drink Mountain Dew, yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely, dude. Jingles are so. When I talked about being a pop writer, like I look at those types of things where I'm like, oh man, what gets stuck in your head? Why did jingles get stuck in your head? Why? And those are ones that I'm like, they're so good. They're so good.
I tried to sell my wife on a jingle. She's in marketing, and she was working for a company that made sandpaper and these sanders, like really high end stuff. And they had this new sander that came out that was called the Mercadeos. And I was just singing Mercadeos, Mercadeos, Mercadeos,
Absolutely.
Mercadeos. And she's like, you can't bring that up at my work. I'm like, well, I'm going to. I
Walk around with like a
yeah.
megaphone. And be like, no, this is it.
Oh, Mercadeos.
Cool.
But she couldn't
Heck
sell
yeah.
the fins on it. They're the Finnish company, and they weren't doing it.
Let's get into some of your other influences.
Sure.
Like since you mentioned MXPX,
Yeah.
that opens up another Pandora's box of sounds I remember from that era.
I got to see them at the Grog a couple years back. Man, it was amazing.
A couple years back?
Yeah, it was like 4 years ago. I got to go to the Grog. and they were like standing at their merch table, and I got to meet like Mike Herrera and
that's
all
so
that. And I was
cool.
like, I'm like, you guys are like my second favorite band.
I saw them
And
at
I
the
get
grog shop too. The one time I saw them, it was $5. I think like 2001 or two or something like that. I used to be really into them.
I loved them. Loved MXPX. And then, you know, it's funny because, like, Sum 41, Blink-182, Offspring, like, those guys, you know, are up there, too, for me. But it was Green Day was number one, MXPX was number two. And Life in General and Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo. And, like, those albums were just so influential to the way that I wrote. And I loved it. And
Ever Passing Moments, the last one I got from them.
That was-
before I evolved a little more musically.
so that Responsibility, I think, is actually my favorite MXPX song.
Oh, cool.
Responsibility and what was the other big one off that album? Oh, it's gonna drive me crazy. Doesn't matter. But Responsibility was. It's really gonna bother me that I can't remember the other single off that album. But those, when I got to hear those songs, I was like, man, they are like still putting out these killer records, and they're still so. And Ever Passing Moment, the title track, was really good. And Misplaced Memories was on that album. Like, there were a lot of cool things on Ever Passing Moment. But yeah, I loved what they were doing. I loved, you know, just, I mean, they were doing this 3-piece, you know, pop punk thing that was, and like, they started off as like a Christian band. They were Magnified Plaid, and then they switched over to, you know, being MXPX and put out like Chick Magnet and Today's in My Way and all these other like just really great songs that, you know, you can still play just on like acoustic guitar and they're still really catchy. And that was always it for me. It was like, what are great songs that kind of, you know, that I will walk around singing and that I could just play on acoustic. And for a long time, I'd actually, even when I played acoustic shows, I was playing all these pop punk songs. I was just slowing them down and playing them on acoustic, you know. So I played like, there are nights that I play like 8 Green Day songs off like early stuff, like 1039 Smooth Out Slappy Hours and Kerplunk. But I would just play them on acoustic and slow them down, and nobody ever knew, you know. And they're just like, oh, this is such nice music. Here, have another shrimp cocktail. Yeah, but man, MXPX was so great. And there were so many other great, like, you know, bands that kind of were in that same thing. Like, so Yellow Card and Starting Line, I got to see them at the Grog when it was still at the bottom of Coventry. And one of my friends, this girl named Lisa, invited me to this, you know, this thing. It was like over spring break or something. And I went with her and I saw this band and I'm like, there's a violin on stage. Like, I've never seen an electric violin in a punk band. And I had no idea who this band was. Like, at the time that nobody knew, you know, it was kind of the same time when, like, not Jack's Mannequin, but whoever that was before.
Something Corporate.
Yeah, Something Corporate was, like, just coming out and stuff. And, like, you had these, like, these bands that were, like, punk, but slightly more evolved, and putting out stuff that was, like, you know, pop rock, kind of, you know, discovering this new genre of where punk was kind of going.
Atari's Sugar Cult.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, so I got to see these bands, and you're like, you know, 2 feet from them, and you're watching them, and you're like, oh, they're really good, you know. But the problem is you see, you know, 100 bands, and you never know which one's going to make it because you're just kind of like, well, you know, these guys are great too. And then, you know, sure enough, one of these bands, and that's always the thing that I always kind of laughed at was people would talk about bands and say like, and people in general just talk about success and talk about like, you know, these gurus who are like, oh man, this is how they did business and this is how they're successful and blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to do this and whatever. And it's like, guys, no, like you have no idea how lucky they got to be where they're at. Mm-hmm. You could have a million other entrepreneurs trying to do all the exact same things or do the exact opposite of what this guy did, and they made it, or this guy made it, and it's the same thing with bands where like, so when I say like you put one foot in front of the other, and how I'm going to define success is not going to be this metric of, you know, quantitative benchmark of like, oh, when we reach, you know, 50,000 followers, or when we do this, or when no, like I'm blessed to be able to play music, and that to me is a win. And beyond that, just trying to connect with the audience and make the world a happier place. And that's, you know, because, man, you can get lost going down that rabbit hole of trying to chase what other people define as success, or what you've seen with these other, business gurus or whatever. And everybody's got a different philosophy, or even if they've got the same philosophy, it was like, if you look at it, like, think about like Russian roulette. If you've got 100 people and one guy wins the Russian roulette tournament, are you going to look at them and think that they're, wow, they won that tournament, they must be super smart, or they must be really great at the game? Heaven forbid he actually wins 2 tournaments, and then all of a sudden, this person becomes like, this amazing person put up on a pedestal, and like, oh, he is really great at Russian roulette. But at the end of it, it's that person won because of luck. And I think there's a lot of, not to say that hard work and dedication and right moves don't go into it, but there's a lot of bands that are out there who made it way early in their career, way earlier than they probably should have made it. But, you look at them and say, oh, they had radio play, they were a success. Well, but then there's other bands who are out there busting their tail, making a living, doing what they love, and maybe they never had the quote-unquote commercial success that these other bands have, but they made it on their own terms, and I don't know, I just kind of got lost. I stopped playing that game of trying to chase what other people define as success.
Personal experiences goes a lot into our personal definition of like what is making it, what is success, and like what is hard work when you're satisfied with your own thing. And even for the listener, like I feel like everyone's got their own version of what bands have made it or not because of what's important to them, what speaks to them, what sounds work
Absolutely.
for them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Especially in just the last 20 years, how much our population has grown and how much we've diversified, especially with music and sounds, what is able to be made with, especially with computers, how we can make sounds. There's genres that didn't exist 10 years ago.
I look at, I'm not a huge Nine Inch Nails fan, but when you look at what Trent Reznor did with what he was given originally, I mean, it's essentially kind of what Phineas and Billie Eilish are doing, in these home studios, and they're using the technology that they have to the best of their ability, and they're putting out the stuff that sounds sonically amazing or sonically different. And whether you like these songs or not, you've got to look at it and be like, man, you are moving the ball down the field. You are changing the genres. You're changing music. And those are the things I look at, and I'm just like, I don't know that I have it in me to want to change music. Like, I know what I like. I know I like pop music. I know that I like stuff that is predictable and repeatable and fun and stuff that, like, that's what makes me happy. I could try to be experimental, but it's not authentic to me, and unfortunately I'm kind of at the point in my life where I enjoy, like, I'm not going to write the same song over again. I'm not going to write the same 3 chords and be like, oh, we'll just do this or just change this, timing a little bit or whatever. Like, but I also know that what I love about music is putting I guess it kind of goes back to that old question where, like, when you play a song for somebody and you're like, what do you like about it? Oh, well, it's got a great beat. That to me is like, if that's what reaches, the everyman, like, then that's what I want to do. Like, I want people to smile listening to my music. I don't want you to have to think too hard, but I also want you to, if you do put on those headphones and you start to hear some of the textures, you hear some of the counter melodies, you're like, I can appreciate it, Mm-hmm. But to me, the art is, how do you write a great song in 3 minutes? How do you get to the hook faster? How do you, so when you asked the question earlier about, does TikTok influence me? Well, no, but I do want to get to the hook faster. I do want to make something that makes you be like, whoa, that was really cool, or wow, that was a great melody, or wow, that stuck in my head. And you walk around singing it, and I want to give, like, again, whether I'm doing magic, whether I'm doing acoustic stuff, or whether I'm doing, the full band stuff, I want to give an audience something that they can smile about. Like, I want to give them, if they're putting their hard-earned money, if they're putting that down on the table to come in and see me, then I want to give them their money's worth, and I want them to smile. It doesn't necessarily mean I want to do covers all night, but I want to give them something where they walk out and they're like, man, I'm happier than when I walked in here.
Yeah.
And I got, 30 minutes to 3 hours of reprieve from my day, and I'm more rejuvenated because of it. And that to me is important. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
I can't wait to hear more. So the new videos that you'll have coming up, is it Marta, you said, that made the
So Marta made the Fallout.
Okay.
She's not involved with any of the other stuff.
Okay.
But we are, and I will tell you that the next one's going to be a little simpler. And then if we follow the rollout that I think we're going to do, which is going to be finally free next, the video is going to be a little simpler. It'll still be funny and poignant, but it's going to be a little simpler. And then Misunderstood, we've got some cool stuff where we have a lot of people involved, and a lot of people across the globe involved in some cool stuff with Misunderstood. Because, ultimately, the song was written about a relationship and basically being like, the lyrics are basically, it happened again, we misunderstood. All that was said is not what was heard. And that is just cross-cultural. I mean, you can't find somebody who hasn't had some sort of misunderstanding with somebody else. Or one of my favorite Calvin and Hobbes comments of all time was Calvin's like, we're both speaking English, but we are not speaking the same language. And I think that's so relevant in just, like I said, in all cultures. And there's so many times, especially when like there was all this political pressure and this pandemic and all this stuff, like people are at each other's throats and fighting about all this stuff. And you almost forget sometimes that like, well, we're all still human. We're all still on this planet together. And so to have this song come out, that kind of a global thing that we're bringing in so many people from across the globe on, to say that there's been times where we've all been misunderstood or we felt misunderstood. And how do we, rise above that, and how do we still find love in the end of that? And so, yeah, so we kind of feel like Finally Free should kind of be the next single, because it's a little more straightforward. It's an old love song that's basically like, why can't I just be free from this love of you? Why do I still dream about you? Why do I still have these same wants and desires? And why can't I just be finally free? But it's a pretty straightforward one. And then Misunderstood, which is a little, you can take it on a surface level of just like, oh, it's a love song that they misunderstood. Or you can start to kind of look down the layers and be like, oh no, this is like human to human, every relationship has these misunderstandings. And so, yeah, so we kind of feel that that's going to be the next, the way it's going to go out is Finally Free and then Misunderstood. And then we've got a bunch of others. I mean, we've got 13 songs in the queue that are ready to go. Most are either finished or 90% of the way finished. And, but they're all in that pop punk vein. And so we're just, and again, it's so sad because like I would love to put out an album, but
it's just not the way it is anymore.
No, it's not. And you can lament about it and be like, oh, I'm still going to put out an album. Or you can look at it and say, look, if we're going to give this thing the best chance of success and try to let people hear it, then we'll play the game. Put it out as singles, play with the algorithms, try to do different marketing techniques and whatever. And, whether it's a TikTok dance or whether it's an influencer who shares it or whether it's, whatever, like we are going to try to maximize all efforts to get this stuff out there. And then not to, show my hand too much, but, the idea is that we have other artists in the queue who we want to do the same thing with. Not in pop punk, but in, pop music and acoustic music and, the singer-songwriter stuff. And there's a lot of great artists. I'm meeting with an artist tomorrow at 2 p.m. who's coming to check out the studio that I have. And she is incredible. And she is, she's an artist that has been mentioned on your podcast before, and she has got so much talent. And somebody who I really can see kind of being the next torchbearer for a lot of this pop kind of music. And but yeah, so
is it someone from one of the openers the other night?
Maybe.
Okay.
So the reason I don't want to say too much is because, you know, in the music industry, there's so many times where you, I feel like especially in Cleveland, like a lot of times people will be like, oh yeah, I'm friends with those people. No, you're not. You just met that person, or you just, you know, or there's times, especially like in business and stuff, where people say things like, oh yeah, we go way back, or we've got this relationship, we got that, and no, you don't. So I don't want to say anything to put, you know, this person in a compromised position, because she's incredibly talented, and with or without me, she's going to be a star. I feel like there are some shortcuts that I can help her with along the way. But then there's other artists that I look at and I'm like, you're incredible. You're your own worst enemy, you know? And so there's some hard conversations I've had with people where I'm just like, dude, your voice is great, but go out and get the reps. Go out and, you know, put in the work and be undeniable. You know, and that's something that's kind of, you know, people don't always want to hear that. You know, sometimes when they're like, well, it's art. You know, this is my art. This is what I do. Great. I don't want to invest in it. I don't want to be part of it. And that's fine. Like, go do your thing. I'm still going to respect you, and I'm still going to, like, help you make it. But it's just, my heart isn't in it. And you know, you only have a finite amount of resources and energy. And so there's, you know, trying to help the bands that I believe in, and trying to help the ones that I think are going to really strengthen, you know, Northeast Ohio music. And that's, you know, and selfishly, like, I still want to be in the biggest band in the world. I still want to be playing, you know, festivals and Super Bowls and be in the Rock Hall and whatever. But I think the you know, going back to that kind of philosophy of saying I want to leave the world happier than how I came into it, is arrogantly, you know, I would love to say that my band is the end all be all, but it's not. It is other musicians. It is other, you know, looking at other people and saying like, hey, you know, I don't like being a mentor. I don't like getting into giving people advice and stuff. But if I can help with some of the pitfalls that I fell into, then maybe, you know, we can be stronger. You can stand on my shoulders and you know, be, you know, I can just be a stepping stone for some, you know, up and coming musicians or people who I think really deserve, you know, great shots at you know, being successful. Because, you know, I've put a lot of time and money and energy into different studios around the area and different people, and but I think ultimately it just makes us a stronger community. And that was something I never had growing up. Like, the first couple shows I did were like Battle of the Bands. And it kind of put the bands against each other, and you were always pitted against these people, and you never wanted to root for them because you were trying to win. And it was terrible, you know? And today I feel like the community is, I mean, when I was 18, 19, like, you never thought about sharing gear or like, hey man, you want to use my drums or my, no, it was always like, screw this guy, like, we're way better. Like, he can just set up his own stuff and whatever. And it was stupid, but it was just the way we were kind of raised in that community. Mm-hmm. And today, man, it's awesome. Like, one of my buddies played a show at House of Blues with a touring band, and the touring band was like, dude, use my kit. Yeah, it's fine. You know, use my drums, use my cymbals, use this. And even that was like, what if I crack your cymbal? What if, don't worry about it. I got more. It's fine. Do your thing. And to me, like, that's the community that we were missing for so long. Yeah. Certain genres kind of found it, but for the most part, I felt like in Cleveland, it was this kind of cutthroat attitude, and we kept cutting each other off by the knees, so nobody ever got ahead. Mm-hmm. You know, but when you ever look at like the big pockets of music that ever popped, whether it was the Bay Area or Seattle or Nashville or whatever, it was because one band got noticed, you know, and then all of a sudden, like, there were a couple others that people were like, well, yeah, if we know that band, then how about these bands? And then all of a sudden it took off, and it was wildfire. Like, people were like, oh, look at all these bands, and bands got signed and all this. Like, there was so much buzz and excitement. And in Cleveland, and there's still a little bit of a level of, like, if you get too big here, sometimes there's some resentment, and sometimes people are like, oh, I liked you when you were smaller. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, we have kind of evolved past that, where it's like, you know, you get one band who catches fire, and I think people are going to start looking at Cleveland and realizing there's a lot of talent here. And, you know, yeah, I'd love for my band to be noticed, but more importantly, I think it's I can be a player in that. I can help that. I don't care if anybody ever knows my name. I don't care if anybody ever looks at me and like, oh yeah, he helped launch that band. I don't care. I care that I can sit back and look at those and be like, I did what I could do for Cleveland and for that music scene. And like I said, man, at the end of my day, I want to know that I made peace at my heart of trying to make that world a better place, better, happier place through art, through music, through smiling.
That's kind of how we feel about this podcast, man. Yeah.
Well, you guys are doing a great job. Like I said, I got to go back and watch some of your episodes and stuff, and I was like, man, you guys, I understand that it's young and you guys are learning and whatever, but you guys do it well. I mean, and you can tell it's authentic, and you guys are trying to let the artist
50
speak.
episodes from now, you're going to see a completely different product, probably. Sure. We're going to be looking back at this one like a year from now, like, oh yeah,
But that's
man.
art. You evolve.
Yeah.
I
In a
started,
good way.
A slightly selfish plug really quick, and I'll be very brief, but we over pandemic when you couldn't go out and you couldn't be with other bands, you couldn't do all this other stuff, I started inviting people over and doing this songwriting thing, and we called it happy hours. And basically you come over, you drink, and you write a song. And there were prompts, and you had a song that you had to kind of use as like an influence, but we'll be rolling those out in the next couple of weeks here. But we did 6 episodes with different musicians, and it was funny because the first couple episodes, I talked too much. I was cutting people off for the just stupid stuff that you don't realize until you watch yourself back, and you're like, whoa, that was terrible. And then by like the 4th, 5th one, I started kind of finding my vibe, and by the 6th one, it felt like felt pretty good. We got our 2nd season starting filming on March 2nd, and I'm really excited for it. But it was just definitely one of those where it was like, man, like, it's so much fun to be drunk writing songs with people, and then you play those songs. And honestly, I'm really proud of the songs that we wrote, and so we'll be releasing those in a couple weeks, and it's a blast. They'll be, we're gonna put them out as like 15-minute episodes on YouTube.
Okay. What channel is that on?
It'll be under Happy Hour Sessions.
Okay.
Cool.
And,
We'll try to share that on
yeah.
ours.
Oh, it's
Cool.
I'll definitely hit you guys up when it comes out, but it's pretty exciting. But yeah, it's the same thing where I just I had to learn. You're never really taught how to interview or how to just shut up, but especially once alcohol gets involved.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's
We're starting
cheers
to-
to all that. We're getting
I'll
towards
run
the
out.
end.
You get the
I
bottle.
use a fist, yeah, all right. Going
Cheers.
full rock and roll.
Gentlemen, thank you guys so much. I really
you're
appreciate
welcome.
Oh, you know what?
the
We have
time.
one last question to ask, though.
We do. Do you have a movie recommendation for us and our listeners out there?
A movie recommendation.
Oh yeah, tasty.
So I really enjoyed Ghostbusters Afterlife, but I've been a lifelong Ghostbusters fan, so it's kind of cheating. But I really enjoyed that. Probably SLC Punk.
Oh, man,
If
nice
there was
throwback.
one movie, I would tell people to kind of watch, and that. So Titanic is probably one of my favorite movies of all time, and if you haven't seen Titanic, I would tell you to go watch it. But
I never heard of that one.
Any
Titanic?
spoilers in that?
yeah, no
that?
spoilers.
Who's in that?
I don't know. Some
There's a door.
yeah.
Has a
The Doors are.
I literally saw Titanic 8 times in the theater. Like, kid you not, I was way into that movie.
I had 4 sisters, and that was when I was growing. It came out when I was 11, so I ended up seeing it 100 times too.
Yeah, no, I loved it. I bought it on VHS when it first came out. It was the 2 VHSs.
2 VHSs.
But no, SLC Punk. For people who have not seen SLC Punk,
That's a great recommendation. I'll second you on that one.
It's a cool movie. I mean, Matthew Lillard. There's some stuff in it that it takes a little bit to kind of get into, and it's definitely.
It's really real.
Yeah, and it's probably dated now at this point, but like, there's the last like half an hour of that movie to me is literally life changing, because I watched it at a time where, I wanted to be this punk. I wanted to be this this anarchist kid who was like, screw the establishment and blah blah blah, and then you watch it through the end and you're like, they're right. And without giving too much away, it was just this great kind of turning moment where you're like, you realize that throwing sticks from outside the house doesn't change anything, and So it's a great movie. So yeah, that or any Kevin Smith film.
All right. All right.
Thank you,
Well,
guys.
Snoochie Boochies. For Cuyahoga Sound Podcast, I'm Evan Stone.
I'm Chuck Schilling.
Peace.